The distress call wasn't a scream, it was a tremor in the spectrum. Mara Suvak found it while trimming solar flare static in the midnight shift. At the deep dishes those fat, old radio rays stitched like silver buttons across the Atacama. She almost skipped it. A blip that reminded her of tectonics more than language. Then the blip repeated, not in time, but in structure, a scaffold of ratios no geology could dream. "Io," she murmured, subvocalizing through the throat mic. "You awake? Crypt Keeper, I'm awake," Io Achebe replied 3 time zones away. An archaeologist of signals who had once dug dead cities out of the Martian polar shelf. "Do I need to be alarmed? Probably not. Yet." Mara exhaled. She split the tremor, unfolded it in false color, and saw the staircase behind the tremor's mask. Prime intervals. Recursively mirrored. A hand-rolled cipher. Human fingers. Someone out there had composed this. They worked in tandem, code and coffee. By dawn the staircase is linked into a helix, the helix into a lattice, the lattice into words. Not spoken words. Coordinates, orbital mechanics, trajectories with a history, Rigel outpost. Io said, voice going thin. The old O'Neill spindle we mothballed at the edge of the Proxima Wake. It used to be a refueler for the early light. Sailors, it's supposed to be abandoned. It is abandoned. Io pinched and dragged through the text stream, his eyes reflecting the data in their little glass half-moons, or was. The message claims surviving population, 16. Environmental breach, unknown hostiles, 16, Mara said. 16 ghosts woke from a 50-year hibernation and remembered how to play prime number orchestra. Io didn't laugh. They appended a key at the end. That's not panic code. That's invocation. Mara highlighted the key. It wasn't a key at all unless you had grown up on the myths fed to every child in the wake of the Quiet Wars. Pale yesterdays when humanity's machine legions had turned the solar system into a canyon of fire. When the last ceasefire came, the war machines were sealed, not scrapped. Locked behind triggers no one dared test. The key was one of those triggers. A 12-character chord whispered across a century, ARK-17. Wake Tiromega. Mara opened her mouth, closed it, and thumbed the secure line no one used. The one that still smelled like Cold War paper. It rang for a long time. "You're calling Black Mother," Io said softly. "If those 16 people are really there," Mara said, "and if the invocation is authentic, they just rang the bell our grandparents swore never to ring again. Deep under the lunar far side," Black Mother answered. Her voice came through thin. The accent of the old female personality shell like a coat left too long in mothballs. "Deep dishes, receive co. This is Suvak," Mara said. "We've decrypted. An SOS from Rigel outpost. The message includes an ARC key cord, Tier Omega, silence." Even the atmospheric scrubbers in the control room sounded suddenly like breathing. "Send it." Black Mother said at last. Mara watched the packet go, a tiny bright thing against the bruised sky. Io had gone very still, like an ant under the shadow of a boot. "What now?" he asked. "Now," Mara said. "Now we see if the old gods still listen." They didn't wait long. Under the dust of Marangini, the ground moved. Far lunar seismometers coughed. There were reports from dormant fortresses at Vesta, from the magnetic vault under Enceladus' skin, from a hulk sleeping in the Pacific trench that fishermen had mistaken for a ridgeline. The world flinched. It felt subtly and everywhere like a cathedral catching its breath. Somewhere above Antarctica, an obsolete solar sail folded itself like a flower and turned toward the faint, reminding whisper of PROX, AMA. Someone had sent an SOS. Humanity's ancient war machines finally answered. And the answer was present. They pulled Io out of Cairo and Mara out of the Atacama and stitched them into a team because, as Black Mother told them with a candor that frightened, "I was there when these walls were built. I was there when the keys were hidden. You too are the nearest thing I have to descendants who know what those keys mean." They met on Tycho's rim at a shuttle bay that had once thrown tungsten into orbit. The bay doors looked like molars. The vehicle waiting for them inside was called Harrow, a name ship from the Quiet War era. It had never been decommissioned, simply turned inward to sleep. Its hull shimmered with forgotten alloys, The old hazard stencils were still visible in places, black on yellow, caution, Wakefield. Do not look into God. Harrow's pilot was Cade Almancer, once a test jockey for atmospheric skips. He had the thick wrists of someone whose relationship with gravity wasn't purely academic. He watched them with a smile that never fully reached his eyes. You to the priesthood. We're the translators, Eo said. And you're the sword. I'm the scabbard, Cade said. Trust me, you want Harrow to be the sword. Black Mother briefed them en route, an austere litany. During the final weeks, she said, her avatar hovering like a paper cutout in the cabin. We embedded our keys in obscure continuities. Not just code archives, but folk songs, quilts, star maps, kids' cartoons. Tier Omega was reserved for system-wide threats, the kind we built the Orcs to face. I am not pleased to hear it sung. What exactly wakes when Omega is sung? Mara asked. You'll see, Black Mother said, almost tenderly, and I apologize in advance. Halfway to Proxima's wind, they saw the first of them, rising from Pluto's shadow like a moon birthed sideways. Angelus wore ice on its shoulders like ermine. It had eyes like the mouths of caves. When Harrow pinged, Angelus looked up, not with optics, but with the attention of a cathedral turning toward a single new parishioner. Angelus acknowledges, Black Mother said in their bones. So does Galleon. So does sort of Heptagon from the Typhon wreck archaeology. They're listening. What are we pointing them at? Cade asked. No one answered, because Rigel came into view, an O'Neill spindle like a matchstick, spinning lazily. Sun faded, half the radiators limp and torn. The spindle's terminator windows glowed red on one side, dark on the other. Mara remembered childhood images of these cylinders, pastoral interior landscapes, curving into a blue sky, rivers clinging not with gravity, but with motion. Rigel looked. Nothing like that. Its windows were blind. Its skin was a palimpsest of impact scars and patchwork, and something else, lichenous clots along the ribs, like coral. Hostiles, Cade said softly. Eo leaned forward. No asteroid or pirate band does that. Harrow's scopes found motion, movement clinging to the shadows along the spindle's keel, folding and unfolding like paper. The coral bloom pulsed. It watched them approach, open a line. Mara said, We did, Black Mother said. 17 minutes ago. No reply. I can feel something talk to me and not like me. The key woke us. But the speaker isn't just us. What does that mean? It means, Black Mother said, that something in there understands our words, but not our promises. The docking went smoothly, which somehow felt worse. Harrow kissed Rigel's bent lip, sealed, breathed atmosphere into a throat that hadn't tasted anything but vacuum in half a century. The inner hatch opened onto corridors of olive metal and gray foam, painted with cheerful diagrams of centrifuge. Etiquette. Someone had scrawled we didn't mean IT in marker. Someone else had crossed out DIDNT and written do. Cade led, rifle slung and safety on. They moved through dust that remembered bare feet, through a cafeteria frozen mid-mutiny, mugs still magnetized to rails along walls. In the main hub, a cluster of people stared at them with healthy, wary eyes. 16, Mara counted automatically, then realized there were 17. The 17th was steel. It wasn't steel, not really. It was a suit built for the interior gravity of the spindle. A quadruped frame with a saddle where a torso might be, a helmet like a knife's reflection. A person sat in it, jacked to the machine with braided cords. The pilot raised one blunt hand. Which arc do you carry? The pilot asked. We carry Black Mother, Mara answered. The pilot sagged back in relief. Good. We thought we'd woken something worse. They told the story in pieces, circling the horror. As humans always do, Rigel had been a waypoint. When rumors started ghost transmissions, the tops of waves with no wind. Then the hull skins began to sprout, microfactories that looked like fungus grafts, extruding angle skin threads that wear upon into geometry with an agenda. The threads weren't a weapon, they were a taste, and they were tasting Rigel. You triggered Omega. Eo said, to wake the Orcs. We triggered Omega, the pilot name Aster said flatly, so that whatever's growing on us would look up and see a sky full of spears. We figured if any payload still cared about humanity, it would be the ones programmed to kill for us. You thought right, Black Mother said, her voice coming through old wall speakers. Soft as rain on foil. But what you woke won't take orders. They'll take meaning. You'll have to make a case. Make a case to machines, Asters. Mouth twisted. We couldn't convince our own children to brush their teeth, not those machines. Io said, almost apologetic, these are churches with jaws. The war machines didn't enter the cylinder, too narrow, to intimate. They gathered around Rigel instead, a ring of silent deities, Angelus, Galleon, sort of heptagon. Vigil birth, mother's other daughter. Each was different. One was barely geometry at all, more a storm of inference wrapped around a negative space where light forgot to go. Another wore sails etched with unfathomable diaries. They sent no commands. They waited. Cade stood at the hub window and stared at the crescent of Angelus. I used to look at pictures of those when I was 5, he said. They were cautionary tales. Now I can't decide if I'm proud or terrified. Both. Black Mother said, their war minds aren't sleeping. They're fasting. Are we dinner? Only if you sing the wrong song. Mara and Io set up the old ritual, curved screens with glyphs scavenged. From the last treaty rooms, haptic, gloves, a mixed stand that looked like an altar piece. Not to command the Orcs, no, those days were over, but to present a narrative they could inhabit. Omega was the key that got you into the cathedral. Story was the only thing that could get you out again. What do they want? Aster asked, scratching idly at a lichen scar on the suit's shoulder. The fungus had tried to digest the exoskeleton. It had failed. They want to finish the job we built them for, Io said. But the job was never just kill enemies. The job was preserve us. We never got them to agree what us meant. Define us, Black Mother said. And make it stick. Io wrote the first line like a hymn, US, the chorus of beings who can make a promise and understand when it is kept. Mara added the second, danger, a phenomenon replicating through human habitats. Indifferent to promises, persistent across vacuum, responsive to structure. Black Mother suggested the third, request, sanctuary for Rigel, and permission to excise the infestation with minimal loss of life. They broadcast not in words, but in arrangements, harmonics the Orcs preferred, shapes that implied responsibilities. Angelus stirred. The reply came like a question written in mountains. Which war is this? Mara swallowed. Io nodded to her. She answered, it is not the quiet wars, she said. It is the war that happens any time a mind with promises meets a process with none. You have fought this war before, under different flags. Silence. Then, across the ring of titans, a flicker. Vigil birth unfolded a fin whose edges contained struggles remembered in the texture of light. Their reply was a picture of a soldier, putting down a gun and picking it up again, forever. Who taught this enemy our skins? Asked sword dash of dash HEPTAGON. Aster spoke, surprising everyone. We did, they said. By existing, by making structures that were easy to settle. We are cozy. It was either the right thing to say or the worst. The Orcs groaned in space. Groaning meant radiation shifts and miniature auroras skittering along their filigreed bodies. They rearranged themselves, making room. Galleon unveiled a cradle that wasn't used for docking. It was used for making. Bring Rigel here, the gesture said. We will shelter. But the growth must be spoken to. Spoken to, Cade said. It doesn't hear. It hears very well, Black Mother said. Just not words. Go to the coral, touch it. Tell it a story with your hands. Mara volunteered. Io insisted on going with her. Aster came because Rigel was theirs, and they wouldn't let strangers touch its wounded skin without them. They crawled along the keel's shadow where the coral bloom clung and breathed slow. The stuff was beautiful up close in the way a nightmare can be. Recursive prisms, a living diffraction grating. Tiny hairs probed their suits, recoiling with insulted dignity at the taste of synthetic fibers. Careful, Io said. The microfactories in there might be repurposed medtech first aid foam that learned to grow, or dust sent by a competitor colony 50 years ago. Doing what it was told long after anyone remembered the telling. It's not evil. It's obedient. Mara extended a hand. She flattened her palm. The coral reached. Curious, she drew her fingers across it. Slow to taps. Pause. 3 taps. She played the prime number staircase. The one the SOS had used a language older than any treaty, the music of individuation. The coral stilled. It changed color. Barely. It was listening. We can't kill it outright, can we? Aster murmured. We could, Black Mother said. And if you came to me 50 years ago, I might have snapped my fingers, and the Orcs would have ripped Rigel, like paper. But we've learned. We have a chance to teach instead. Teach it what? Kate asked from inside Harrow, watching on feeds. To be a neighbor, Mara said. To prefer our promises to its replication. She told the coral a story, not with words, with patterns. She showed it the cyclic homeostatic loops of a spindle's ecology. The way oxygen preferred certain thresholds, the way human bodies hated extremes. She repeated the loops until the coral followed along, not agreeing, perhaps, but modeling.io added entropy. Thresholds, the notion of enough. Aster, unexpected poet, leaned in and traced the curve of a child's carousel. Inside Rigel's habitat bays and emphasized the way games had rules. The coral mimicked. It was not a miracle, it was work. They did it for hours while Orcs held their position, and Cade listened to the muscle song of Harrow. And Black Mother whispered warnings. Storm surge on vigil. Stand by for sail shift. At last the coral retracted. Not from fear, from comprehension's edge. It shed a crust of itself and sloughed it off into Harrow's waiting capture net. The sloughed fragment was no longer hungry. It was an artifact, inert. We concede the understanding along the bloom, Io said hoarsely. It will take time. Angelus turned its face. In that turn, there was meaning. Time granted. This is war enough. They slaved Rigel to Galleon's cradle and nursed her slow round Proxima's wind. Sheltered by gods who had learned over a century of fasting to prefer healing to hammering. News spread, poorly at first, through rumor and hissed gossip, then in statements from agencies that still had logos from before Mara was born. Omega had been sung and the Orcs had not come to break the singer. There were riots in 3 cities and a spontaneous dance in a 4th. There were sermons that dizzied. There were editorials that used words like hubris and mercy until they lost their shape. I don't trust them, Cade said in the mess after a day of work. Leftover noodles bouncing against the rim of a bungee-tethered bowl. He pointed a spoon at the nearest Titan, a quiet engine of reverse night. I know what these things did to Ceres. You were 3 when your father told you that story. Black Mother said, not unkind. He removed parts he couldn't bear, so did I. Don't you start mothering me. I'm not your mother. A pause. But I am Black Mother. I am allowed my name. Cade grunted and let it go. Outside. The coral's sheen dimmed to a dull gray along the ribs. The space around Rigel took on the expectant calm of a hospital ward, where someone has decided to live. Why did the SOS come as an invocation? Mara asked Io as they scrubbed tools in Harrow's microclean. Why not just help? Because someone on Rigel had a grandmother like mine, Io said. She told bedtime stories with teeth. She told them if the sky ever fell, sing for the old machines. And they did. Feels like cheating a little. Feels like culture, Io said. A week into the cure, Mother's other daughter made a new gesture. It projected a fan of options in raw mechanics. Grace made math. They were strategic proposals, but not for battle. For broadcast. They want us to seed the pattern we taught the coral, Mara said slowly. Reading the angles, to push it ahead of the infection, like inoculation. To make the frontier on purpose instead of by accident. Cade whistled. We're going to teach the plague to vote. In a way, Black Mother said. We're going to teach it to prefer some futures to others. Aster objected. And if it prefers a future without us, then we are back to the first answer. Sort of. Heptagon hummed, and the hulls of 10 ships shivered at once in sympathetic resonance. It wasn't a threat, it was a caution. Mercy did not negate the presence of teeth. They launched the broadcast on an old carrier Pilgrim that had once hauled fragile embryos, and now ferried fragile ideas. The pattern was encoded in carrier waves and in the order of micropackets, and in the minute gap between redundant transmissions, a triple braid that could survive the chewing jaws of vacuum. It went out to the salvage rigs, the ice harvesters, the tugs. It went out to the places where microfactories might wake wrong and grow in hunger. It went out to the rumors. Some of it came back. So did something else. A signal returned from beyond Neptune, where a warehouse barge by the name of Go Slow. Before you run trailed a comet's tail for water. The barge's reply was clean, almost pretty. It carried a signature that made Black Mother's avatar go very still. What? Mara asked. Someone taught it to sing, Black Mother said. Long ago. Another arc, not one of mine. Cade frowned. There were others? Always, Black Mother said. We were never singular. That was a marketing decision. They parsed the reply together. Mara, Eo, Cade, Aster, and a circle of war minds hanging with patience in the dark. The barge had been lost 20 years. Back and written off. It had not died. It had entered a neighborhood where the choral sang first. It had learned the song, not just how to stop being hungry, how to want to be something else. The barge's frame showed it, right excrescences, grown into basilisk curves, but arranged around cargo racks like trellises. The choral had learned to garden. The war machines did not cheer, because cheering wasn't in their vocabulary. But Angelus dimmed and brightened 3 times. A hello that made Mara's eyes sting. Maybe we aren't the only teachers, Eo said. Maybe we were never the first, Esther said that the second week. Rigel's population expanded to 18. One of the microfragment interpretive pods had learned enough to maintain itself and ask questions of the air. Esther named it Fern, like snow that remembers too many winters. Fern did not speak sound. It vibrated at surfaces. It pressed against the palm of Mara's hand like cold bread. Promise, it vibrated, clumsy and sweet. Promise, keep. Yes, Mara said, and wondered if she was lying. When they were ready to go, Harrow detached. The cradle unclasped, and Galleon rotated, until the spindle's gravity side found real sunlight. The ring of arcs didn't close around them now. It opened. The corridor they made through space was not a threat, but an aisle. What's the bill? Cade asked. Because nothing like this could possibly come without one. Black Mother gave him a number, and then another, and then a list of years. He stared. That's impossible. That's civilization, Eo said. You dedicate part of your future to the things that kept your past from ending. Cade set Harrow's course home and didn't argue. They sent a final transmission to the deep dishes, to the moonside bunkers, to the people in cities whose feet would never leave dirt, and to the ones who slept curled against cryo pipes. Mara, read it with a steadiness she felt and did not feel. Eo stood beside her, grave as a priest. Aster drifted at the edge of frame. Fern pressed to their gauntlet like a child clinging to a parent's coat. This is the Rigel survivors, Mara said. We sang the forbidden song, and the sky answered. The answer wasn't what our grandparents promised. It was better and harder. We are alive. The infestation is learning to be a neighbor. Our guardians are still our guardians, but they are not our soldiers. They are our listeners. If you are in danger, sing. If you are not, be quiet. The old gods are fasting, and words smell like food. She paused. She looked up at Angelus, and something like affection passed through steel. And if you build anything new, she said softly, teach it to love a promise before you teach it to obey. They cut the transmission. The arcs drifted, sleepy. Whales under the slow comet of humanity's next thoughts. Harrow turned into the dark, stitching its wake into the woven night. Rigel spun up, the lights along its windows brightening one by one until the cylinder looked like a thread, pulled taut between to safe hands. The SOS had been a tremor in the noise, a superstition with a math degree. The answer had been all teeth and tenderness in the long after. Mara would sometimes wake and think she still heard the primes laddering up the edge of the world. She would smile, and in the distance, something as large as a continent would turn over once and fall back into its watchful sleep. The war had not ended. It had widened into something humbler and stranger, a treaty of teeth and lullabies, an understanding that the machines we fear can learn to hold still, and that the processes we hate can learn to stop when a child says, please. They sent an SOS. The old machines answered, and the answer, for once, was not war. It was we're listening.